They told me she deserved it, but I didn't. They celebrated her success and silenced mine. But today, on this stage, with their eyes on me, I won't ask to be seen. I will show them who they forgot. If you've ever been the invisible one, the underestimated one, this is my story, and maybe it's yours too. My name is Ava Mitchell, and I was born to be second, not second born. No, I was older, 2 years ahead of my sister Claire. But somehow I always ended up behind her. I didn't realize it at first. When you're 5, you think everyone gets the same amount of love, that every parent claps equally hard at school recitals, that every child gets the same number of hugs, the same warmth. But over time, the evidence stacked up like cold bricks. Claire was the daughter they praised, they posted about, they invested in. I was the daughter they forgot until I reminded them. Our home in suburban Illinois looked picture perfect from the outside, 2 stories, a well-trimmed lawn, white shutters, and flower beds. Mom insisted on replanting every spring, the kind of place that whispered stability. But inside, I was always slightly out of frame. Christmas mornings made it the clearest. Claire would get the expensive gifts, new gadgets, limited edition toys, clothes, with the tags still attached. My pile was practical. A sweater from the clearance bin, socks, a half-used sketch pad once meant for Mom's classroom. Your sister needs things that will help her grow, Mom would say in that clipped matter-of-fact tone she used when she didn't want to explain further. But I was growing too, just differently, quietly. Art became my oxygen. I would sketch for hours trees outside our window, the folds in my worn bedsheet. Portraits of Claire when she wasn't looking. No one really noticed, except Grandma Ruth. Summers with her at Lake Geneva were my escape. She was the only one who saw me. She'd sit beside me on the dock with a book in hand, occasionally glancing over my shoulder as I filled pages. "You see the world in layers, Ava," she'd whisper. "Don't let anyone flatten you." Those words lived inside me, tucked safely between my ribs. At school, I excelled. Not in the obvious ways Claire did. She had charm, she debated with confidence, she sparkled under pressure. I worked hard, honors in math, awards in economics. I even won a regional business plan competition sophomore year, beat out 150 students. When my economics teacher called my parents about it, my mom's response was a simple, "That's nice. Don't forget to help Claire with her presentation tomorrow." "That's nice." It became the refrain of my life. By junior year, I knew I'd be paying for college myself. I picked up shifts at a local coffee shop after school, served lattes to adults who didn't look me in the eye, and saved every tip like it was a lifeline. Claire, of course, had the full cheer squad. She joined debate and instantly became the team's rising star. Mom and Dad were front row at every tournament. They'd take her out for dinner after upload photo albums titled "Our Brilliant Claire." She was fast-tracked, gifted, promising. And then came senior year. Claire had skipped a grade, so we were graduating together. We both applied to Westfield University, one of the top business and political science programs in the country. We received our letters on the same day. I still remember it, my hands trembling, heart hammering alone in the kitchen as I peeled open the envelope. I got in. Full acceptance. Business program. When I told my parents, Dad barely looked up from his phone. "That's nice, Ava." Minutes later, Claire burst through the front door with her own letter, waving it like a golden ticket. "I got into Westfield," she screamed. Suddenly, the room was alive, laughter, cheers, champagne popping in the kitchen, sparkling cider for us. Dad hugged her, lifted her off the ground. Mom cried. I stood in the same spot, invisible in my own triumph. That night at dinner, Dad cleared his throat. "We've been saving for your education since you were born, Claire," he said, looking only at her. "Westfield's tuition is steep, but we've got you covered. You won't have to worry about a thing." I waited for my turn, for the sentence that would start with an Ava. It never came. I asked quietly, "What about me?" Silence. Mom reached across the table like that made it better. "You've always been independent," she said gently. "You'll figure it out. Maybe take out loans. Or consider community college." But the real gut punch came from Dad. "She deserves this," he said. "She's earned it. You've always been a bit scattered. Risky." The word tasted like poison in my mouth. Scattered. I'd been working 2 jobs, building a business plan from nothing. That night, I cried for the first time in years, not just because they chose her, but because I realized they always had. And I knew then I'd go to Westfield anyway, with or without them, even if I had to burn through every ounce of strength I had left. Even if it broke me, I'd go. I'd outshine Claire, and one day I'd make them eat every word they'd ever used to dismiss me. But what I didn't know then was that the revenge wouldn't come in some loud, fiery explosion. It would come quietly, elegantly, and it would be unforgettable. That night, after the dinner that shattered what was left of my belief in fairness, I locked myself in my bedroom and finally let the tears fall. 17 years of trying, 17 years of chasing their validation, all culminating in one cold, calculated sentence: Claire deserves it. You don't. I'd always thought that if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, did everything right, eventually I'd be seen. But some doors don't stay closed because you're not knocking hard enough. They stay closed because the people behind them never intended to open them for you. The next morning, my eyes were swollen and red. I found my parents in the kitchen sipping their coffee like it was any other day. I stood there, spine stiff, but voice trembling. How could you save for Claire and not for me? Mom barely looked up. It's not that simple, Ava. We had to make decisions that were realistic. I have better grades than Claire, I said. I've been working for 2 years. I've never asked you for anything. Dad snapped his newspaper shut like it was a gavel. Claire has always been focused. You've been all over the place. With your drawings, your business experiments. There's no clear future there. I wanted to scream. You never even asked about my plans. Mom sighed. We'll help you fill out loan applications. Plenty of kids do it that way. But they had already decided. They weren't changing their minds. In their eyes, I was too risky to bet on. That weekend, I drove 2 hours to Grandma Ruth's house, my car rattling like my chest did when I cried. I told her everything, every word, every insult hidden in concern, every omission. She held my hand the whole time, her eyes never leaving mine. My brave girl, she whispered. Sometimes the greatest pain becomes the greatest fuel. Your parents, they're wrong about you. Deeply, tragically wrong. But you have something they can't measure. You have fight. She didn't have the money to help. Her fixed income barely covered her own needs. But she gave me something far more valuable, her complete, unwavering belief. You have to go to Westfield, she said, eyes fierce. Don't let their limitations become yours. So I decided I would go, even if it destroyed me. The next morning, I started applying to every scholarship grant and financial aid option I could find. I buried myself in FAFSA forms and essays about resilience and need, and the future I refused to give up on. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Chen, stayed after school nearly every night to help me. I've rarely met a student more determined, she said, as we submitted my 25th application. I got a few small scholarships, $500 here, $750 there. Not enough. But it was something. With a mix of federal loans, private loans co-signed by Grandma Ruth, and a couple local community grants, I scraped together enough for my first year at Westfield. Claire would live on campus, of course, in a premium dorm, paid in full. I found a listing for a tiny apartment 45 minutes from campus, shared with 3 other girls I'd never met. The paint was peeling and the building looked tired, but it was cheap. I said yes immediately. Then came the job hunt. I applied to every business within walking distance of campus, cafes, bookstores, gas stations, anywhere. 2 weeks before a move-in day, I landed 2 jobs, a coffee shop near the business school and weekend shifts at a used bookstore downtown. The contrast between our 2 college preparations was painful. My parents bought Claire new clothes, a top-of-the-line laptop dorm decorations from catalogs. They hired movers for her and threw her a going-away party with neighbors and extended family. Me, I packed secondhand clothes into old suitcases and borrowed cardboard boxes from the grocery store. The night before I left, Mom handed me a pair of faded twin sheets. They're still good, she said, already turning away. Move-in day came. They drove Claire in the family SUV, bursting with new bedding, fairy lights, and framed photos. I followed behind in my Honda with the cracked windshield and a brake that squealed every time I slowed down. They turned left into the dorm parking lot. I kept going straight toward the rundown apartment that would be mine. Mom rolled down her window. "Good luck, Ava. I hope this all works out." I didn't respond. Because this wasn't about luck anymore. This was war. That night, I sat on a thin mattress in a room that smelled faintly of mildew, listening to my new neighbors shout through the walls and someone's dog bark for over an hour. The weight of it all pressed down on me, the debt, the distance, the crushing loneliness. I wondered if I'd made a mistake, if maybe they were right. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Grandma Ruth. "Remember, my brave girl diamonds are made under pressure. You're already shining." I wiped my tears, opened my laptop, redrew my schedule for the semester. There'd be no free time, no parties, no margin for error. But I would not break. The next day, I went to the financial aid office to double-check my budget. The assistant director, Ms. Winters, sat me down and reviewed every line with care. "You're taking on a lot," she said, "but I've seen students like you before. Just promise me you'll come here when things get tough." I nodded. That promise would become more important than I could possibly imagine, because the semester hadn't even started yet. And already I was running on empty. Freshman year didn't begin. It hit. Like a wave I wasn't ready for. Like someone dropped me into a storm and whispered, "Swim." While most students adjusted to dorm life, explored clubs, made friends, I was juggling 2 jobs, a full course load, and a bank account that hovered dangerously close to zero. My day started at 5:00 a.m. every morning. I'd study in the dark, scribbling notes with bleary eyes and instant coffee as my breakfast. At 6:30, I'd pull on my barista apron, tie my hair into a messy bun, and open the cafe across from the business building. I learned how to fake a smile at 7 a.m., how to pour lattes while mentally reciting economic theories, how to hide the fact that I was surviving on day-old muffins and anxiety. After my shift, I'd race to class still wearing the faint scent of espresso and cinnamon syrup. I sat in the back charging my phone while recording lectures, not to review later for fun, but because I literally had no other time to absorb the material. Every minute of my life was scheduled. Work, class, shift, lecture, study, work, sleep, maybe. Repeat. Groceries became strategy. Could I afford both rice and the workbook for Econ 102? Would ramen last until payday? Which textbook could I borrow from the library for 2 hours instead of buying? Claire, meanwhile, lived a life in contrast. Through Instagram posts and occasional overheard conversations in the quad, I watched her college experience unfold like a glossy brochure. Sorority mixers, fall retreats, weekends home for mental reset. Sometimes I'd pass her in the hallway of the Westfield quad. She'd wave bright and breezy on her way to meet friends. I'd wave back, stomach growling, feet sore from my 3rd shift that week. We were on the same campus, but worlds apart. And yet I wasn't drowning. I was surviving. Barely. But I was doing it. And then something shifted. One Thursday evening in September, after a 12-hour day split between classes and shifts, I returned home to find a note taped to the fridge, "Ava, eat." I made extra. "Please, Matiafrin Zis." It was from Zoe, my roommate from the back bedroom. We'd barely spoken beyond polite hallway nods. She was pre-med, always in scrubs and study groups. I opened the fridge and found a container of pasta, still warm. I stood in the dark, the refrigerator light humming, holding that container like it was made of gold. She didn't have to do that. She just saw me. That night, for the first time in months, someone fed me without expectation. The next morning, I found a cup of tea waiting for me on the counter. When I turned around, Zoe was there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You can't keep living like this," she said quietly. "You'll collapse." I laughed bitterly. I don't have a choice. She studied me for a moment, then said something that cracked open something fragile inside me. "You do now, I got you." And she meant it. Over the next weeks, Zoe became my anchor. She edited my papers when my brain stopped cooperating. She created flashcards for exams while I worked late. She fought off the other roommates when I needed the living room to cram. When she discovered I was skipping meals to afford textbooks, she cooked double portions. "You're feeding your future. Let me feed your body." I'd never had a sisterhood like that. Not even with my actual sister. Zoe was proof that sometimes the family you chooses you back. But peace never lasted long in my world. Midway through the fall semester, disaster struck. The cafe I worked at slashed hours across the board due to budget cuts. My income dropped by 40% overnight. I was suddenly staring down rent, utilities, loan interest, and no way to cover it all. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my budgeting spreadsheet open, tears silently slipping down my cheeks. The numbers didn't lie. I couldn't afford to stay, not unless I gave something up work school housing. Each choice felt like cutting off a limb. Then I remembered my promise to Miss Winters, the financial aid advisor. I emailed her at midnight. Subject line, emergency appointment, please. She replied at 6:07 a.m. Come by this morning. We'll figure something out. That same day, I sat in her cramped office while she reviewed every detail of my situation. After a long silence, she looked up. Your grades are excellent, she said, and I have something for students like you. She slid a folder across the desk. Inside was an emergency grant application and a recommendation letter from my professor, Dr. Bennett. She also mentioned you might be a great fit for a research assistant position in the business department Ms. Winters added. It pays more, it's flexible, and it opens doors. I couldn't breathe. Dr. Bennett noticed me. I'd sat in her business ethics class, always in the back, always quiet. I didn't think she even knew my name, but she did. And she believed in me. I walked out of that office with a new job, a new grant, and something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. What I didn't know then was that the opportunity she handed me would become the turning point of my entire life. The research assistant job changed everything. Not because of the money, though, I won't lie. The bump in pay made breathing easier. Rent didn't feel like a looming guillotine anymore. Groceries became less about rationing and more about choice. No, it changed everything because it made me feel seen. Dr. Bennett wasn't like the other professors. She didn't just teach, she noticed. She had this quiet, laser-focused way of listening that made you feel like your words actually mattered. My first day working for her was a blur of nerves and caffeine. She handed me a stack of survey responses from local businesses and asked me to find patterns, what owners said, helped them survive, downturns, what didn't, what they wished they'd known. Simple enough, but to me it felt like opening a window. Hours flew by. I forgot to check the clock. I forgot to eat. I was hungry, but not for food, for purpose. By week 3, I had color-coded graphs, trend summaries, and a growing fascination with how resource limitations force small businesses to become unexpectedly innovative. Interesting, Dr. Bennett murmured, running a finger over one of my charts. You're not just tracking data, you're connecting behavior. I blinked. Isn't that what research is? She looked up, eyes sharper than her tone. No, Ava, that's what good research is. Those 5 words cracked something in me. No one had ever called me good at something like that. Not my parents, not even Claire. Dr. Bennett gave me more responsibility not because I begged, but because she trusted me. Slowly, the research wasn't just her project. It became our project. We dove into case studies, interviews. She let me co-write summaries. She asked my opinion during faculty roundtables. Every time she introduced me as my assistant Ava Mitchell, she's brilliant. I had to fight the instinct to look around and make sure she wasn't talking about someone else. One Thursday afternoon, we sat in her office surrounded by sticky notes and open books. You know, she said, setting her glasses down, most students think entrepreneurship is all risk and flash. You see the structure behind it, the discipline. I nodded, tracing a circle around the phrase I'd just written in my notebook. Necessity is the mother of strategy. She followed my eyes. Exactly. Then she asked a question that planted a seed I didn't realize was waiting to grow. Have you ever thought of starting something of your own? I wanted to laugh. I had thought about it all the time. But those ideas lived in the dark corners of my mind like tiny plants afraid to stretch in the wrong light. I wouldn't even know where to begin, I said. You've already begun, she replied. That night, I stared at my ceiling until 3 a.m., ideas bouncing like fireflies under my skin. My fingers itched to build something. I wasn't like Claire strategizing about student council campaigns or internships through Dad's contacts. I didn't have connections, or capital, or a safety net. But I had skills, real ones. Budgeting, marketing, scheduling, client service, adaptability. And I had one unfair advantage. I knew exactly what small businesses couldn't afford because I'd lived it. By mid-semester, I had a plan. A simple online platform that offered affordable virtual assistant and marketing services to local mom and pop shops. Nothing fancy, just services that freed them up, appointment booking, basic email campaigns, digital flyers, Yelp optimization. I called it Third Door Strategies, a nod to all the locked front doors I'd encountered and the unexpected ones I'd pried open. Zoe helped me build the first version of the website. Another roommate designed a logo in exchange for me editing her scholarship essay. I printed flyers, walked to local cafes, cold emailed small vendors from the research database Dr. Bennett gave me access to. My first client was a bookstore owner who hadn't updated her website since 2008. I rebuilt it for $75 and a stack of used business books she said looked like they needed someone hungry. The second was a local florist, then a neighborhood pet groomer. By the start of spring semester, I had 3 regular clients. The income wasn't huge, but it was mine. My world was still small, still chaotic, but for the first time I felt like I had my hands on the wheel. Every night after work and class and client updates, I stayed up tinkering, improving my offerings, tightening language, calculating costs. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was creating, and while Claire was out brunching with her sorority sisters, I was watching analytics graphs rise on my secondhand laptop. My business wasn't impressive by most people's standards, but it was growing. And more importantly, I was growing. But I didn't know that Claire's world, the one built on safety and approval, was just about to start collapsing. It started with a knock. Soft, hesitant. Like guilt had to build up courage before it could knock on my door. I opened it to find Claire standing there, rain-damp hair clinging to her cheeks, her laptop clutched tight to her chest, like it was the only thing anchoring her. She didn't say hi, just blurted it out, voice shaking. I'm failing. I need help. For a full second, I just stared at her. Claire, the one they always chose. The one who never stumbled, never worried, never begged. Now standing in my doorway asking for rescue. I stepped aside. Come in. She took in the apartment with wide eyes, the peeling paint, the 2 small kitchen table, the stack of books I used as a nightstand. She'd never seen my world up close. She placed her laptop on the table, opened it to a half-finished document. My thesis, she muttered. Professor Goldstein says my methodology's flawed. He said I have 3 weeks to fix it or I won't graduate. I sat down slowly and I don't know how to fix it. The words seemed to wound her more than the failure itself. I skimmed through her draft, rushed logic, weak sources, no structure. Pretty words, no backbone. It wasn't hopeless, but it needed surgery. I closed the laptop. Okay, I said. Let's start from the beginning. That night was quiet. No music, no small talk. Just the sound of keys tapping and my voice guiding her through concepts she should have learned years ago. And to her credit, she listened. She didn't whine, she didn't deflect. She listened like someone who was finally realizing that charm and praise and parental applause don't mean a damn thing when you're on your own. 3 days passed, then 5, then a week. She started coming over every night. We worked in silence at first and slowly. The walls thinned. One night, as I scribbled on a notepad, I heard her whisper, "I had no idea it was this hard for you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Another night, she asked, "How did you even survive freshman year?" I told her about ramen dinners, about cold nights without heat, about falling asleep on textbooks, because beds were luxury when your brain's on fire. Her eyes glistened. They always said you were doing fine. I laughed, not bitterly, just tired. Fine is relative. Silence. Then slowly she added, "They said you were distracted, that you didn't have focus, but you're laser focused. You're terrifying." It was the first time she'd ever said something that sounded like admiration, maybe even awe. By the second week, her thesis was stronger. She was stronger. And so was something between us, something I didn't expect to ever grow a kind of trust. One night she brought dinner, actual food, from a place with seasoning. We sat on the couch legs folded under us, watching a documentary I had to review for class. Midway through, she turned to me. "Do you hate me?" I didn't answer right away. She looked down. It's okay if you do. I think I hated you too because I was scared of you. You never needed them. I always did. That caught me off guard. I had needed them. Desperately. But I'd learned how to fake not needing anyone because the alternative was breaking. I didn't hate you, I said eventually, but I hated how easy things were for you. I hated that no matter what I did, I was still invisible if you were in the room. She nodded slowly. I think I wanted to be you more than I wanted to admit, but being you is hard. That made me laugh. You have no idea. But maybe now she did. As her thesis shaped into something real, something earned, she started standing a little taller, and I started softening. Not because she apologized, but because for the first time she saw me. Not the bitter version, not the afterthought. She saw the fighter, the builder, the one who rose from what they threw away. But just when I thought I understood this new fragile bond between us, she said it. I told Mom and Dad, you're the reason I'll graduate, that you saved me. And suddenly, the air in the room thickened. They want to thank you, invite you to the family dinner, publicly. Publicly. Like this was a moment to celebrate. Like they hadn't chosen her over me every day for 18 years. Like their shame was a band-aid that needed my silence to keep it pretty. Claire didn't understand what she'd done wrong. She was offering peace, recognition, a seat at a table I'd never been allowed to join. But in her eyes, I saw it, the one thing she couldn't quite say. Please come. I don't want to be their only daughter anymore. I stared at her. I had power now, voice, victory. But what would I do with it? The house was bigger than I remembered. Rented, of course, for the family weekend, for image, for show. The kind of place with granite counters and carefully staged throw pillows where everything whispered, look how perfect we are. Claire had texted me the address then again 2 hours before dinner. Please come, I told them. I meant it. I wore black slacks, a clean button-down, and no makeup. If they wanted me to perform, they'd get me as I was. When I arrived, laughter spilled from the dining room, loud, easy, effortless. The Mitchells in their element. I paused at the threshold. Claire saw me first. She lit up. Actually stood. Ava's here. For a brief moment, the room hushed. Forks paused. Eyes turned. I stepped in like an outsider in a film scene I didn't audition for. My parents wore their finest. Dad's blazer was crisp, Mom's dress loud with florals that didn't quite suit the occasion. They smiled a beat too long, a bit too wide. Ava, so glad you could join us, Dad said, voice full of practiced warmth. We were just talking about Claire's graduation plans. Of course you were. I took a seat at the far end of the table, not quite at the kids' end, but nowhere near the center, where the real conversations happened. Dinner was already plated. No one asked what I wanted. Conversations swirled around summer internships, wedding dates, someone's baby shower. I sat quietly, chewing slowly, tasting more tension than food. Then it happened. Uncle Jack, my mom's younger brother, leaned across toward my father. Didn't Ava win some business award too? Claire mentioned it last week. Dad chuckled lightly, eyes flicking to me. Oh yes, she's been doing some freelance things, very entrepreneurial, keeping busy. Freelance Aunt Marie blinked. Claire said she won a national competition. Mom jumped in, smiling too tightly. Well, you know Ava, she likes her little projects. Little projects. My fingers curled under the tablecloth. Actually, Claire interrupted, her voice loud enough to pause nearby conversations. It wasn't little. She turned toward the group. Ava won the National Collegiate Business Innovation Competition. She beat students from Ivy Leagues. Her business is registered. She has clients. Real ones. Silence. My mother's fork clinked against her plate. And Claire continued breath-hitching slightly. She paid for her entire degree herself. No help from anyone. Not a cent. Dad's face froze. She also worked 30 hours a week through all 4 years, Claire added softly, while maintaining a perfect GPA. Now everyone was staring at me. Grandma Ruth beamed. She didn't just survive college, she said proudly. She conquered it. Aunt Marie's eyes widened. Why didn't anyone mention this before? There it was, the shift. Mom cleared her throat. Well, we didn't want to make Ava uncomfortable. She's always been very private about these things. No, I said, finally speaking. You didn't mention it because it didn't fit the story you wanted to tell. All eyes turned. I felt it, my heart pounding, my breath tight. But also, clarity, sharp as glass. For years, I continued, I worked in silence. I scraped together pennies, rationed meals, and still got better grades than most of this table. But because I didn't come wrapped in polish and privilege, you called it freelance. Mom stood. That's enough. No, Grandma Ruth said firmly. Let her speak. I stood too. I'm not here for revenge, I said. I came because Claire asked. But let's stop pretending. You didn't believe in me. You chose not to. Dad's jaw clenched. Ava. You gave her the money, the praise, the time, and I was fine, independent, invisible. Because you were always strong, Mom said, as if that excused it. No, I said, voice cracking. I was never strong. I was just never given a choice. The room was dead silent. I looked around at the faces that had watched me grow up, smiling at me during birthdays while investing their hopes in someone else. And I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. I set my napkin down. Thank you for dinner. Claire stood too. I'm leaving with you. Dad looked alarmed. Claire, but she didn't wait. We walked out together, the front door closing like a punctuation mark on an old chapter. Outside, the air was cooler, softer, more real. You didn't have to do that, I said. I wanted to, Claire replied. It's time they started seeing what I've seen these last few weeks. Behind us, the house pulsed with dim light and muffled tension. Ahead of us, the quiet street, the future. But what none of us knew was that this public reckoning was only the beginning. The email came at 2:17 a.m. I was halfway through editing a client's Instagram campaign when my inbox pinged with the subject, Westfield Commencement Opportunity. I almost deleted it, thought it was another reminder about cap and gown deadlines. But something told me to open it. Inside. Ava Mitchell, you have been selected by the School of Business Faculty and Administration to deliver this year's student address at graduation. I froze. Read it again. Then again. My hands trembled. The screen blurred. It was real. For a moment, I sat in the dark listening to the low hum of the refrigerator, feeling something I hadn't allowed myself in a long time: pride. Real bone-deep pride. Not relief, not survival. Something closer to triumph. The next morning, I walked into Dean Rodriguez's office, still unsure if it had been a dream. She smiled as I sat down, then handed me a sealed envelope. It's official, she said, and well earned. We don't often see students do what you've done, especially alone. I swallowed hard. You won't be alone on that stage, she added gently. Everyone who helped you get here, even if it was just a kind word, will be sitting there with you. That night, I started writing and rewriting and crossing out every other line. How do you summarize 4 years of loneliness, pressure, exhaustion, and still make it sound hopeful? How do you stand before 1,000 strangers, including your parents, and tell them this is what strength actually looks like? Zoe came home to find me on the couch, surrounded by crumpled paper. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me, handed me tea, and softly said, "Start from the day they said you couldn't." So I did. Every night that week, I wrote until my hand ached. I remembered the nights I cried into lone paperwork, the mornings I smiled through 4-hour shifts after sleeping 3 hours, the exact moment I realized I was no longer waiting for their permission to exist. The words poured out not in anger but in truth, and in the middle of all that, Grandma Ruth arrived. She walked into our apartment carrying a carefully folded piece of fabric. "I stitched it myself," she said. "Graduation stoles are usually just school colors. But this one," she unfolded it, navy blue with gold thread, and on the inside seam in her handwriting, "Diamonds are made under pressure." I pressed my face to her shoulder, letting the tears come. For once, they weren't from pain. They were from being seen. 2 nights before graduation, Claire knocked on my door again, this time holding cue cards. I thought maybe we could practice "You always helped me. I want to return the favor." So we rehearsed in the living room, her pacing me, reading aloud. Halfway through, I stumbled. The line was, "Sometimes being overlooked is the greatest training ground for leadership." I choked on it. Claire placed a hand on my arm. "That's the line," she whispered. "Right there. That's who you are." My speech became more than words. It became a reckoning. The night before the ceremony, Dean Rodriguez pulled me aside after rehearsal. "I wanted to tell you," she said, "we've added a few surprises to your introduction." I raised an eyebrow. She smiled. "You've built more than a business here, Ava. You've built an example." I didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, but because I could finally hear my own voice in my head and I didn't want it to stop. Morning came soft and bright as if the world had been reset. I slipped on my gown, my cords, my shoes. And finally, Grandma stole the one thing that felt more powerful than a diploma. In the mirror, I saw someone else. Not the afterthought. Not the independent daughter who never needed anything. I saw someone forged, cut, polished. A diamond. But what I didn't know was that my speech, the one I wrote in the quiet, the one meant for healing, and would shatter everything. The sun hit just right that morning. As if the sky itself knew. Campus buzzed with camera flashes, squeals of joy, the flutter of black robes in June wind. Seniors clutch programs like golden tickets. Proud parents straightened ties. Grandparents cried before anything even began. I stood in the robing area surrounded by my classmates, adjusting the navy and gold stole Grandma Ruth had made. Her words stitched against my collarbone like armor. Diamonds are made under pressure. Claire appeared beside me, radiant in her cap and gown. "You ready?" she asked softly. I nodded. No more hiding. The processional began a slow river of students marching into the massive auditorium. As we filed in, I spotted them. Front row center section. Mom, Dad, in their finest, beaming at Claire. I walked a few paces behind her. Dad didn't even notice me at first. But Grandma did. She locked eyes with me and nodded, slow, proud, unwavering. The ceremony began. Speeches came and went. Names called. Cheers erupted. Then the university president stepped to the podium. And now he said, his voice rich and clear, "We invite a truly extraordinary student to the stage one whose journey redefines resilience innovation and what it means to create opportunity where none exists." He paused. "Please welcome Ava Mitchell, recipient of the National Business Innovation Award, founder of Third Door Strategies, and your student commencement speaker." A moment of silence, then murmurs. I walked slowly toward the stage, heels steady, throat dry. I felt the weight of every step and the eyes, especially theirs. I reached the podium. Bright lights, a sea of caps, 1,000 heartbeats waiting. I took a breath and began. 4 years ago, I arrived at this university with nothing but a dream and a plan. Not a financial plan, a survival plan. I had no savings, no safety net, but I had drive. I worked 30 hours a week while taking full course loads. I built a business from scratch while memorizing economic theory. I lived off $20 grocery budgets while learning how to pitch to clients. And through it all, I kept hearing the same thing. "You're strong, you're independent, you'll figure it out." What they meant was, you're on your own. But being on your own teaches you things a classroom never can. It teaches you how to calculate risk and take it, not because it's safe, but because there's no other option. It teaches you how to create value not from privilege, but from necessity. It teaches you to keep showing up even when no one's clapping. The crowd was quiet now, not bored, holding breath. I scanned the front row. Dad sat stone still. Mom's hand was clenched in her lap. Claire watched with tears welling. I continued. "Some of you walked onto this campus with parents who'd already walked it before you. Others like me walked in, hoping someone would see you. For years, I thought success meant being chosen by professors, employers, even family. But I've learned something far more powerful. Success doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself again and again, especially when no one else will." A murmur of applause, then stillness again. I let it settle. Today I graduate with honors. Not because I was born into advantage, but because I turned every door slammed in my face into a blueprint for one I'd build myself. And because of that, I am proud to announce, starting this year, Westfield University will offer the Emma Wilson Resilience Scholarship for students who rise from silence, who lead without permission, and who are building their own way forward. The audience erupted. A standing ovation. I looked out and saw Zoe on her feet, Claire wiping her cheeks, professors clapping, Grandma Ruth still seated, but only because her knees wouldn't let her stand, smiling with quiet fire. Then I looked at my parents. Mom's hands stayed folded. Dad's expression was unreadable, because for the first time in their lives, they weren't the ones telling the story. I was. As I stepped down, the president met me at the bottom of the stairs. "There's more," he whispered. He turned back to the mic. "And just one more announcement before we conclude." He smiled. "Ms. Mitchell has accepted a position with Alexander Global Consulting, one of the country's most prestigious firms. Her journey will also be featured next month in Business Innovation magazine's cover story, The Self-Made Scholar." The room thundered again. People weren't just clapping. They were looking, really seeing me. After the ceremony, we gathered outside. Flashbulbs, bouquets, families hugging. My parents approached slowly. Dad tried to sound casual. Well, that was unexpected. I smiled, polite, not warm. "I've always been this person," I said. "You just didn't look." Mom blinked. "We're proud of you, Ava." I know I said simply, "now." Claire slipped her arm around my shoulder. "She was always the storm. You just missed it." Behind us, a banner waved in the wind. "Congratulations, graduates." And under it, I felt the full weight of closure. But what I didn't realize yet was that this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of everything. 2 weeks after graduation, my parents invited me to lunch. No context, no strings, just a message. "We'd like to talk, just us." I sat at a downtown cafe across from them. They looked older. Not aged exactly, just smaller, like pride had been keeping their posture tall all these years, and now it had folded in on itself. Mom stirred her coffee. Dad glanced at the condensation on his glass. Neither looked at me right away. Then Mom said, "We've been thinking a lot about how we raised you, about what we missed." I said nothing. "We saw strength in you," Dad added, and mistook that for not needing support. "That's not what happened," I said softly. "You didn't see strength. You saw inconvenience. You invested in the easier product, the shinier one." His face flickered. Mom's eyes welled. "You're right." I blinked. That I hadn't expected. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "I wrote this for you," because I knew if I spoke it out loud, I'd ruin it. I took the envelope but didn't open it. "Emma," Dad started. "Ava," I corrected. He paused, nodded. "Ava, we can't change what we didn't give you, but we want to rebuild something new. And if I say no, I asked, then we'll respect it," he said, voice unsteady, "but we'll still keep trying." That answer was the first adult thing I'd ever heard from him. Back in my apartment, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten, uneven, vulnerable. "You didn't deserve silence. You deserved applause. We didn't know how to handle your fire, so we turned away from it. We mistook your independence for rejection. But now I see you weren't walking away. You were walking through." For the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. Not out of hurt, but because I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't know if that was forgiveness, but it felt close. Meanwhile, life moved forward quickly. I started my position at Alexander Global Consulting. My first week was a blur of polished glass walls, espresso machines that made better lattes than I ever had, and introductions to people who had read my story before even meeting me. They didn't see the underdog. They saw the rising strategist, and I rose to meet them. At night, I still ran third door strategies remotely now with a team of student interns from Westfield. I paid them fairly, mentored them personally, and reminded them often, your lack of privilege is not a lack of potential. My story was published in Business Innovation magazine exactly 1 month after graduation. The cover headline read, "Built from Nothing, How Ava Mitchell Redefined the Startup Path." Grandma framed it. Zoe cried when she saw it. Claire sent a photo of it taped to her desk at work. "I keep it here as a reminder," she texted. "Not of what you achieved, but of what I almost missed by not knowing you sooner." One evening, I returned from work to find Grandma Ruth and Claire in my kitchen making lemon chicken and listening to old jazz records. "I like this version of our family," Claire said as she handed me a plate. "No performances, just peace." I smiled. Not everything needed to be dramatic anymore. That night, I sat on my tiny balcony overlooking the city. The wind played with my hair. My inbox buzzed. It was from Westfield University. They were holding a small ceremony unveiling the Resilience Scholarship plaque, and they wanted me there. Not just as a name on the wall, as a mentor to the first recipient. I stared at the screen, heart swelling. At the ceremony, the dean spoke briefly, then motioned for me to approach. The plaque gleamed, simple, powerful. The Ava Mitchell Resilience Scholarship, for those who rise anyway. I ran my fingers over the engraving, then turned around and saw my parents in the back row. They weren't front and center. They weren't trying to own the moment. They were just there, quiet, present. It was the best they'd ever been. Later, Claire and I stood in the university quad. She nudged me. "Do you think you'll ever fully forgive them?" I looked up at the scholarship sign. "Forgiveness isn't one big moment," I said. "It's 100 quiet ones. Some of them might have started today." She nodded, arms around me. We watched as a new student, wide-eyed and hopeful, stood before the plaque, lips moving in silence, maybe whispering a promise to herself, the same way I once had. What I didn't know then was that she too would build something no one saw coming, just like I did. A year later, I stood barefoot on the dock behind Grandma Ruth's lake house, the morning mist curling around my ankles like breath. The sun hadn't quite risen. Birds murmured in the distance. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, I didn't feel the need to do anything. I just was. No pressure, no comparison, no performance. Just Ava. My life had changed. Third Door Strategies now served over 40 clients statewide, from local bookshops to immigrant-owned bakeries. I'd hired 5 full-time staff and partnered with Westfield's Business School to provide internship credit to students from low-income backgrounds. We weren't the biggest agency, but we were real. We were ours. At Alexander Global, I was leading mid-level strategy pitches, trusted by VPs, and mentoring new hires. Not because I climbed fastest, but because I never forgot how it felt to be climbing alone. I spent weekends with Grandma Ruth and Claire more often now. Our rhythm had settled, cooking long walks, laughing over how far we'd come. Sometimes I still caught Claire looking at me like she was discovering me for the first time. One night over tea, she asked, "Do you ever wish it had all been easier?" I stared into my mug. "Yes," I said, "but also no." She tilted her head. "I used to think the struggle was the cost of success," I said. "Now I know it was the soil." My relationship with our parents, still complicated, but honest. They didn't try to rewrite the past anymore. They listened more, defended less, apologized often, sometimes clumsily, sometimes too late. But it was real. And in the quiet moments, like when Mom forwarded me an article about women-led startups with the caption, "Thought of you," or when Dad asked if he could donate anonymously to the Resilience Fund, I saw them trying, not perfectly, but purposefully. That mattered. But the real shift, the one no one saw, happened inside me. I stopped chasing applause, stopped performing for approval, stopped needing the people who once ignored me to finally say, "We're proud of you," because I was proud of me, and that was enough. I still woke up early most days, old habits. But now instead of panic, I woke with purpose. I journaled. I ran. I sketched. I called Grandma. I lived like someone who had survived the fire and realized she didn't need to prove she didn't burn. She just needed to feel the sun again. One evening, while watching the sunset from my apartment rooftop, I received a message. "Hi, Ava. I'm Maria. I'm the first recipient of your scholarship. I just wanted to say, I used to think being alone meant being lost, but your story helped me realize that sometimes being alone is where we learn to become found." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I replied, "You were never lost. You were just building." That night I lit a candle on my windowsill and placed an old photo beside it, a picture of me at 16. In it, I'm holding my Westfield acceptance letter, smiling, but unsure. I touched the glass, whispered to her, "We made it. And not just through, we made it beyond." The world hadn't changed. People still underestimated quiet girls, still rewarded charm over character, still missed the ones sitting in the shadows with fire in their chests. But I had changed. I no longer waited to be chosen. I chose myself. And every time I stood in a boardroom or offered a scholarship or sat with a student who thought they weren't enough, I passed that choice on. Because the truest revenge is not success. It's peace. It's building a life so full, so free, so completely your own, that the ones who overlooked you become a footnote in a story they don't even recognize anymore. I closed my journal that night on a single sentence. I am no longer proving. I am simply becoming. And in that moment, for the first time, I didn't feel like the other daughter. I didn't feel like the afterthought. I didn't feel like I was behind anyone. I was just Ava, finally, completely, and beautifully me.